The analogy about putting milk into a fridge I used often. You could put milk into a fridge, but it always had a shelf life. And actually, that's kind of why I fell in love with the InsurTech space, because the InsurTech space came along and challenged all the norms that we believe to, hold true forever. It's not that the way we did things were wrong, it's that there might be opportunities for us to enhance, change, and do things in a very, very different way. Hey, I'm Nigel Walsh, the Managing Director for Insurance at Google Cloud, and this is the future of insurance.
Nigel, I'm very excited to sit down with you. Well, we've already been sitting down for quite a while talking about things that we probably should have been recording, but we can talk about them all over again. But thank you for making some time.
It's great to be here finally.
Can you just tell people a little bit about who you are? I'm assuming they actually already know, but tell them anyway.
It's a funny one. I am so Nigel Walsh, as I said. I want to say like 100% insurance nerd and 100% technology nerd. And I think I've landed the actual dream job in that I'm in one of the largest technology companies on the planet, with the opportunity to go and change one of the most important industries on the planet that we're both truly passionate about. So been here about 2 years. Prior to that, 5 years at Deloitte, 7 years at Capgemini, pretty much focused on insurance, everything from, large scale transformation, whether it's Guidewire or Salesforce, helping out on claims and policy, all the way through to, I think when we first got together, the world of InsurTech, where I led at Deloitte how we were going to go to market and support major carriers and InsurTechs to start joining the dots and changing the way we think about insurance.
Yeah, you've been, I guess, lucky to be in what is a really exciting moment, I think, for the industry, given your interests. But at the same time, it's also been much slower than the hype might imply in a lot of ways. And I know for people like you and myself, we're like, okay, let's go already. There is lots of great progress and things happening, but we are also quite stuck, despite maybe not needing to be as much as we have been.
And we were talking about this beforehand as well. There's not a single day that goes by that I don't wake up and go, how do we go faster?
Yeah.
And it excites me and scares the life out of me. And I'm always trying to work out where the pressure is coming from for us to motivate to move forward. And I learned this from one of my colleagues, Sean, many, many moons ago. He said the pressure from the right or a compelling event was the only reason we would actually move forward in certain industries. And you can break that down across lots of our lines of business. Let's take COVID, for example. And I've used this example many times. Lloyds of London, if you'd gone to Lloyds and said, hey, we want to implement a work from home policy, or go to any major carrier across the globe and say, we're going to do flexible working, work from home, and we're going to do this in 2 weeks, everyone would have laughed us out of the room.
Yeah.
The fact that we could close down and move, I guess, within 24 hours in some instances, and over, maybe 1 to 2 weeks in others, and not drop a single beat, is a testament to the people and all of the folks and things that we've got in place today. So actually, the compelling event, whilst it was awful, also proved that lots more is possible than we've often thought about previously. Or maybe we've overthought about things or overplanned things in some ways. And maybe that's because we're just risk averse as an industry. So I think compelling events like COVID were critical for the acceleration of certain things.
Yeah, it was an acceleration that maybe isn't as easily repeated because it took, these sort of Herculean efforts and breaking all the rules. But if we don't learn anything from that and figure out how we could move similarly quickly without, having to move mountains in the process. And that's the thing that's concerned me a bit, is I've seen some kind of reverting to the mean.
You're spot on. And actually, I talked a lot about digital indigestion. And what I meant by that was we've raced so far forward, and we should really be proud of how we've managed to maintain and do all the things that we did. What I didn't want to see us do as an industry is jump backwards to the way things always used to be.
Yeah.
So what is it that we've learned from the last couple of years that we can now leapfrog forward and keep moving forward from, as opposed to, well, we missed this and this, we should go back and dot the I's and cross the T's, because it's what's the old saying, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah.
I probably got that wrong.
No, that is I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And I'm not going to worry about whether you got it perfect because then we can't move forward. So, um, you do have a number of sayings. A lot of them are food related, but they really do stop me in my tracks. And I think one of them, your milk analogy, that I'm going to make you repeat. That's one that I think actually catches a lot of us up, where we get in kind of the lack of humility to recognize that just because we were great at one moment doesn't mean we're always great, or we could never change from it. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, and actually, the point we were talking about earlier was very early in my career, I started working with a knowledge management company, and there was loads of leading practices about how you manage knowledge in an organization. And for anyone in an insurance organization or a consulting organization, we've all been there. I've been around contact centers across the US where you see people, dare I say, with paper files on their desk that they're checking to go, is this
Yeah.
the latest piece of information that I need? And they're constantly updated. If you've got thousands of contact center agents and now work from home agents, how do you make sure they've got the latest and greatest information that they need to be able to give to their clients going forward? And when I was back in that organization, it's probably 2 decades ago now, the analogy about putting milk into a fridge I used often, in that you could put milk into a fridge, but it always had a shelf life. You always had to go back and update it, refresh it, change it, whatever else. It wasn't a case of put it in there once and it will be there forever.
Yeah.
So that for me was critically important. And actually, that's kind of why I fell in love with the InsurTech space, because the InsurTech space and fintech before that came along and challenged all the norms that we believe to, hold true forever. It's not that the way we did things were wrong. It's that there might be opportunities for us to enhance, change, and do things in a very, very different way.
Yeah.
And I guess that's when I get back to I'm passionate about the evolution and revolution, or digitize versus digitalization. We've been very good at digitizing, which is not wrong. It's hey, we all need to improve what we've done. Is there a quicker, smarter, faster way to do it? Yes. But how often do we actually pause and say, do we actually need to do this at all?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Sometimes the right solution is nothing. We miss that. Not don't do anything different, but why are we doing this in the first place?
And I think we may blame compliance or the fact we've always done it this way, or hey, I've been here for 30 years in the company, it's the way it's always been done.
Yeah.
What I actually like most is the execs that you come across that have been there, 25 or 30 years, and are at the leading edge of change and going, we can't do it the way we've always done it. I love finding those individuals because they're passionate about bringing that organization forward.
Yeah. And I haven't personally seen a clear correlation between age of the company and willingness to do that. So I've seen 100+ year old companies who have said, hang on, if we're at 120 underwriting questions in our app and we want to trim it down, we might get to 80 something. Is that the right answer, or should we actually start at no questions and see which ones we absolutely have to ask, and we end up at 18? And to see that, I mean, there's a company in particular I've seen do that. That's 100 and something years old. Why can't we? You don't have to be new to be able to do that.
No, and I think there's a couple of angles to that. The angle one is, what's the inside out view, as in what's the insurance company view, looking out to change what they've always done, and they will optimize as best they can. And it depends who's in the process. We'll come back to the question I had that I was asked about, what's the value of your EV battery? I'm like,
Yes.
oh my God, I was literally losing myself on it. But the flip side to it is, and whilst we can get to questioners, I was reading about a travel insurance company, was it late last week, that had announced a questionless underwriting process. Whilst it's possible, it doesn't mean to say it's always the right thing to do. And the context I give is, I use my mum a lot in my podcast as an example, rightly or wrongly. I'm pretty sure she never listens to these, so I'm okay
So
with
it's
it.
okay. Yeah.
And if you are listening, Mum, I'm sorry. But as a late 70s-year-old lady that's always done something in certain ways, she's comfortable with things getting better and better. But if I then whipped it away completely and said, we're no longer going to do that at all and ask you anything, you actually might end up with the reverse, to go, hey, I've always used to give you my information about this, and this. but no, you're not asking me anymore. How do you know you got the right price? So actually still ends up in an inbound call to clarify or reaffirm,
Yeah.
which I guess then goes back to you've got to really personalize these for the people that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with my son, he'll take what he's given online and happily believe it, whereas my mum might want a different perspective. So
Yeah.
you've really got to start personalizing these experiences and say, hey, um, Oscar, you got to go check X, Y, and Z. Are these assumptions correct? And for my mum, answer these 4 or 5 questions. I actually remember it. You've just reminded me of a chat bot we did probably about 15 years ago that paused before it responded to the question.
Yeah.
And it only paused so that the end user would get the impression that someone was thinking about it.
We had an IVR, interactive voice response demo we were doing it. This is when I was at Liberty Mutual years ago. Telephones had only just been invented, it seemed, and it really was trying to sound like a human. And so when it was, you get to the point where the IVR can't help you and it's got to take you to a person, the kind of errored out message is the voice goes, this isn't going so well. Let me get someone to help. And it's like, yeah, that's very human, but that's also maybe not the right way to handle it. But it is at least having the sensibility for those little cues. Is have we pushed it too far, or we pushed it in a way that is devoid of the customer's perception of it, and we need to get that outside in recognition of what actually they need and what's the unforeseen consequences that we've just created.
Yeah, the empathy of the situation is critical. If I'm just going to call for a claim status update, no one really is going to mind too much if it's an automated. Brian, here's the update of your claim. If you want more information, speak to an agent, and we can take you straight through.
Yeah.
Versus a car accident in which there's bodily injury involved, and you actually needed to get reassurance and someone to, hey, I've got the emotions to actually help you at that time. So
Yeah.
be able to recognize those key moments of truth that matter, I think would go a long way to help insurance companies and the perception of insurance companies that they have with end customers.
Yeah. Um, Nigel, I recently got a new treadmill and it came broken. And the company was very good about getting a tech sent out, and they got the parts and everything. He showed up. Turns out the parts they sent were not the thing that was broken. So within an hour of him leaving, I got an automated email from them that the unit has been reported to be serviced and the case is closed. Now, I, of course, freaked out. I called them and their response is, no, that was just about that particular visit, but we still have the thing open. I'm like, but that's not what your email said. And now I've gone and wasted 45 minutes on hold. And I've been very frustrated that, this new thing is not working and you're not supporting me right. And they're like, but that's what the system does. And they kept sort of trying to mansplain to me, if you will, of why what they were doing was correct and just didn't accept the basic customer feedback that you just caused concern and confusion because of a system required message. Why, and the thing is, that may sound ridiculous. In the industry, we do that kind of thing all the time.
Yeah. It,
But to your point of your battery example that I do want to get into. So you saw what in an application for motor coverage.
I was on an aggregator site in the UK, putting my information in to get a renewal for my car. I drive an EV, and one of the questions that came up that I had not seen before, and I won't say I'm infamous, but I'm well known for complaining about dumb questions or questions that make no sense to the average consumer.
Yeah, opportunities
I.e.,
for us to do better.
well, but almost putting the burden back on the customer where they have no experience or capability to know. So
Yeah,
if I said to you, Brian, what lock have you got on your front door? And are all your locks to the same standard globally? And if they're not, can you give me the ability to do it? And I live in an older house, or in London, the house is an older house, and the locks on each of the doors are all different.
yeah,
So I can't answer that question truthfully or correctly. There's not enough space to go into each one and go, actually, the lock on the back door is this, and on the front door it's that. And I just don't know. And then they said
yeah,
to you, well, what's the construction of your X or Y? I'm like, well, I'm not a builder. How would I know
yeah,
this? I've got no
yeah,
clue whatsoever, and it was built 100 years before I was actually born. So I've just got no idea. But the battery question that came up was really interesting because it was the first time I've noticed it. And it said, what's the value of your battery in your car? And lo and behold, I didn't buy a car and a battery separately. I bought the EV that has it all bundled together.
Yeah.
And I had a little Google for it. You can probably get a view of it, but equally, shouldn't that be the sort of thing that we provide to the end customer?
Yeah.
Or does the customer even care one iota? The answer is probably not. Now, I can fully understand why the insurance company wants to know for multiple reasons, either repair, recovery, issue, or whatever else. But it's not a question that we should make the client's responsibility unless they have authority or accountability to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I had all kinds of questions of, okay, well, what do you mean by value? And on what basis? And the reality is, if you smashed up your car once it was covered, they're not going to take your answer to that original application and be like, okay, here's the 20,000 pounds you said it was worth, less whatever depreciation. They're going to come to some other valuation anyway.
Well, and then you look at auto during the COVID crisis. Secondhand auto prices were up 40%.
Yeah.
Now, does my battery depreciate because it's being used, or does it go up, or down?
Yeah.
And it was like, maybe I was thinking about the question too much. I just thought it was it's the wrong message to be sending and the wrong question to be asking clients.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, back to your point about feedback and the treadmill, we weren't linking client feedback with underwriting and distribution people at the same time to go, is this the right sort of flow that we want to onboard customers in the right way?
Well, and then the thing that got me is, even if you decide you want to put undue burden on your customers through the sales process or otherwise, you're making underwriting decisions, risk assessment and exposure decisions off that information. If there's a risk that that's not accurate and you have alternatives that are accurate, that, by the way, would yield a better customer experience, why aren't you using them? Because now you've ruined the customer experience, or at least made it more cumbersome, created friction, and you're getting less accurate information into your underwriting models. So you're going to have a less accurate price, which motor's not terribly profitable to begin with. And right now it's not profitable. So why would you make that worse?
Yeah.
That's what got me is like every single perspective you put on this, it was the wrong thing to do, but we do it. And that's not the only example out there.
There's tons, right? And I think this is where you go back to the overall view of what self-service might actually be. I have no issues with self-service. I think it's a really empowered way of doing things. I've not been to a contact center to book a flight or a hotel or whatever. I can now self-serve all those things myself based on preferences, and they know me. And I absolutely love. Same for homeowners and auto in the UK, all automated, all through aggregators for me, direct into the site, and it's done in a really efficient way. I absolutely love it. I'm a big fan of it. But self-service can't mean doing other people's jobs for them. So it's almost got to go, is this our responsibility, or is this something that we need to get from the client to give us their preferences? And then what can we come together in the middle that's in the Venn diagram that says we can assume these things against Brian or Nigel, or against a car of that age, or a property in this location, using either first party or third party data that we can go and consume.
Yeah. Look, I know we're getting close on time. I do want to push you a little bit on because of the perspective you have. When we think about, there's always the battle of the InsurTechs or the legacy players, who's going to win, and is Lemonade going to put State Farm out of business? Whatever the story might be. And I know they're sort of partnering with Aviva in the UK, so the State Farm in the UK, well, that's not going to happen because they're friends. But you do have reasons why you think one is at least positioned to do well. How do you see this all playing out? Do you see there being a chance of having winners and losers? Or, I asked Caribou Honing the same thing, and he sees it being more symbiotic and partnership based. What's your take on kind of the future outlook?
If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I was really bullish on hey, we've seen what's happened to a whole host of other industries, and distribution and access to insurance is going to change dramatically over the coming years. I think as the last 5 years have gone by, I'm probably very much with Caribou in terms of it's much more of a collaboration. I think this industry needs each other. Yeah. I still think there's way too many mouths to feed along the way, and we can optimize that for certain things. And I think you're going to see it fall into commoditized versus non-commoditized products. Commoditized for me could equally be a level of homeowners or travel or auto to some extent. I've talked about embedded for, back to the cake analogy, for the best part of 5 years, if not longer.
Yeah.
I still believe in many of these cases. So I think you'll see a lot of change across both direct to consumer, B2B, or even B2B2C. So on the D2C side, I think there's a lot of opportunity. If I look at my kids at 10 and 13, if they consume in the same way that we've done, we've probably broken something or not being pushing hard enough. On the B2B side or B2B2C side, I think there's plenty of insurtechs that have picked a niche, done an amazing job, and will then have insurance companies start to orchestrate all these things together, which I think is a phenomenal opportunity that says ultimately this is going to be a bigger collaboration than people thought at the outset. So, year one, we're coming after you. It was all going to, XYZ is going to destroy a large carrier. The reality is this industry needs collaboration.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. And you didn't even know that that's the theme for my next book. So secret plug, but thank you for that. That's brilliant.
You could go a stage further though, right? And we've talked about this quite a few times. At what point does reinsurance capital connected directly to distribution materially change the chain?
Yeah.
And that's an important one.
Yeah. Well, and I think actually the reinsurers have been so active on the InsurTech front, strictly just because of the number of MGA models that have been used, or folks have used the MGA model to get up and running. Reinsurers have been extremely active in building this next generation of approaches. So I think they're really well positioned, but yeah, there's a lot to that point.
But they're also well positioned, in my mind, at least, because they don't have the sensitive relationship between agent, broker, and customer to go disrupt.
Yeah.
So look, I think we need it all. I suspect there's opportunity for optimization across all of that, almost back to the digitization comment we started out on.
There's so much more we can talk about. You start thinking about embedded and reinsurance, and maybe that's a model where disintermediation of the primary insurer becomes more of an opportunity, because the whole distribution game is totally different, and the brand of the insurance is different.
But you've got to link it back to societal changes. And I have often taken then, how do we have a broader long-term view that says, are my kids going to own and drive cars in the same ways that we did?
Yeah.
Are we going to own property in the same way that our parents did or our grandparents did? Yeah. And that's different country to country. And that's one of my big lessons I've learned as I've moved from the UK to the US, is attitudes to spending and ownership and that sort of stuff. So, in the city, the closest thing you'll find me to on a car is actually on a city bike. So, not only a car, don't need it, walk around. And I get that, and that's obviously different if you're in urban versus suburban versus rural areas. So, but I still think that's all up for grabs.
Yeah. City bikes feel about as heavy as a car when you're trying to maneuver them, but yeah, it's quite different.
I think it's to make sure you don't get hit by New York traffic, especially if you've got AirPods in and going to. If I'm going to die in New York, and I hope I don't, obviously, it's going to be from a city bike or a scooter going the wrong way up a one-way street.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Just as well I look the wrong way still as a tourist abroad still, right? I'm always looking the wrong way.
Yeah, that's me in London. I'm looking both ways constantly because I can't be bothered to figure out which way I should actually look.
If you notice in London, if you notice in London, the instructions on the street are great because most of us are all looking at our cell phones.
Yes.
And if you look past your cell phone on the street in London, it says look left or look right.
I didn't notice.
There you go. Next time you look.
I'm purposely not looking at my phone because I am so worried about getting hit by a car. Maybe I should do next time I'm over. Well, it's fantastic. Nigel, I'm glad we finally got to do this. It's good fun, and I appreciate you taking some time.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it, and here's to many more.
Hey, a big thank you to Nigel for taking some time out of his day. He's extremely busy, and it's just great to get to talk to him. We went in with no agenda. We talked for about, 20 minutes or so before we started recording, talked about a bunch of different things that we could have spoken about. And we're like, all right, let's start recording. We'll talk about that. And of course, we largely talked about other stuff, a couple of things that we had hit on, but that's the whole thing about hearing from people like Nigel and Nigel in particular is there's so much going on. There's so much thinking we need to push ourselves on, and getting these moments to just engage with someone who is thinking about the same problems and coming at it from a slightly different perspective slightly different background and with a different set of tools than a lot of us get to use on the day-to-day, that helps push us, helps see possibilities, helps us challenge maybe the ways we've been thinking about things and some of the traps or the patterns that we've fallen into that could be holding us back as an industry. So I'm unbelievably thankful to Nigel for giving some of his time. And I hope all of you really took that in and said, maybe you disagree with some of what he said. Maybe it got you thinking a little bit more about what is, is going on your end. But as long as it has you thinking, as long as it has you looking for something different, something better, something to push us forward and possibility where things could go, and that was a success. So thank you to Nigel and the team at Google Cloud for giving him up for a bit. And I hope to see you all back soon next time, but a great way to kick off season 4 with none other than Nigel Walsh. Thanks, everyone.